August 1943. 34,000 Allied troops surged onto a remote Alaskan island, bracing for a desperate showdown with thousands of Japanese defenders. But the enemy was already gone, vanished into the fog weeks earlier. What follows is a catastrophe no one saw coming, as confusion, friendly fire, and hidden mines turn what should have been victory into tragedy. How did the good guys become their own worst enemy? The answer begins with the invasion of Kiska. The Aleutian Islands stretched like a broken chain across the North Pacific, battered by wind and fog. But in 1943, Kiska was more than a far-off rock. Just a year earlier, Japanese troops had landed on American soil. First Attu, then Kiska, drawing a jagged red line across the United States map and igniting alarm in Washington and Ottawa. The memory of Attu was fresh. Nearly 1,000 Americans killed or wounded in a battle fought yard by yard, through mud and snow. No one in command doubted that Kiska would be just as costly, maybe worse. Allied planners poured everything they had into the operation. Orders called for overwhelming force, 34,426 troops, Americans and Canadians, would land in waves. The United States 7th Infantry Division, still blooded from Attu, would lead the main assault. The 13th Canadian Infantry Brigade, drawn from the 6th Canadian Infantry Division, would land to the north, marking one of the largest Canadian combat deployments in the Pacific. The 1st Special Service Force, a new joint American-Canadian commando unit, would see its first combat on Kiska's volcanic slopes. The assault would not go in alone. Over 100 warships, including battleships and destroyers, gathered off Kiska's coast, their decks stacked with shells and landing craft. The 11th Air Force flew relentless sorties from Amchitka and Adak, dropping more than 400 tons of bombs in the weeks before the landing. On August 15, 1943, the fleet unleashed 330 tons of naval artillery in a single day, hammering the beaches and mountain ridges where thousands of Japanese defenders were believed to be waiting. The stakes could not have been higher. Intelligence estimated at least 5,000 enemy troops dug in across the island, ready to fight to the last man. The lessons of Attu haunted every briefing. Bunkers hidden in the fog, minefields lacing the beaches, machine guns zeroed in on every approach. For the Allies, Kiska was the last enemy foothold on American territory. The plan was simple in theory: land overwhelming force, crush resistance, and reclaim the island. But as the first landing craft nosed toward the shore, no one imagined what actually waited in the fog. On July 28th, as thick Aleutian fog rolled in from the Bering Sea, a Japanese task force slipped past the Allied blockade and entered Kiska Harbor. In less than an hour, more than 5,000 soldiers vanished from the island. Destroyers and cruisers, led by Rear Admiral Kimura Manjiro, loaded the entire garrison onto waiting ships. The operation was so swift and silent that not a single Allied scout or patrol boat caught sight of the evacuation. The only witnesses were the gulls and the swirling mist. Signals intelligence offered hints. Allied analysts noticed the sudden radio silence from Kiska on July 28th. Transmissions that had once buzzed with coded orders simply stopped. Aerial photographs showed bomb craters left unrepaired, and movement in the harbor seemed to dry up overnight. Yet for Rear Admiral Thomas Kincaid and his staff, these were signs of a trap, not a retreat. The memory of Attu, where Japanese defenders fought to the last man, made any suggestion of a quiet withdrawal seem like wishful thinking. Commanders braced for ambush, convinced the enemy was hiding in the mountains, waiting for the landing to begin. By the time the Allied fleet assembled off Kiska in mid-August, the only thing waiting for them was fog. As landing craft surged toward the beaches on August 15th, a dense, freezing mist dropped over the island, cutting visibility to near zero. Arctic wind whipped the surf into a frenzy, and the temperature hovered just above freezing. Men could hardly see the end of their rifles, let alone the next squad over. Maps became useless. Compass readings blurred as units lost track of direction and distance. The fog was so thick, voices barely carried from one foxhole to another. The island itself became an adversary. Every shadow looked like a sniper's nest. Every sound in the mist set nerves on edge. Patrols advanced blindly, tripping over volcanic rocks and tangled brush. The expectation of battle hung in the air, heavy as the fog. In this confusion, the difference between friend and foe vanished. The Japanese had left nothing but empty bunkers and hidden mines, but the Allied soldiers could not know that. The environment itself now dictated the course of the invasion, setting the stage for chaos before a single shot was fired. Gunfire cracked through the fog before anyone saw a target. On August 16th, the first major firefight broke out between American and Canadian patrols, each convinced the other was the enemy. Visibility was so poor that soldiers shot at shadows, the only warning a muffled shout or the sudden flash of a muzzle. In less than an hour, 28 Americans and 4 Canadians lay dead, with nearly 50 more wounded, casualties not from enemy bullets, but from their own side. Patrol leaders scrambled to regain control, shouting passwords into the mist, but confusion only deepened. The official logs from the 7th Infantry and the 13th Canadian Brigade read like a nightmare. Friendly units riddled by rifle and machine gun fire, medics crawling through brush to pull wounded men from ground they had just secured. A battered field diary from a Canadian private, recovered after the battle, captured the chaos in a single line. Could not see 6 feet. Heard footsteps, opened fire. It was our own boys. 4 of ours gone before we even knew. The sense of dread never lifted. Each squad advanced with fingers tight on the trigger, nerves stretched to breaking. No one could tell where the next shot would come from, or if it would be aimed at them by a friend. Men scrawled names on tags and letters home, not knowing if the next burst in the fog would be their last. The cost of misidentification grew with every hour. Even as the island itself remained silent, no enemy, only the echoes of gunfire and the cold weight of loss. Mines and booby traps waited in every hollow and bunker. Japanese engineers, knowing the evacuation was coming, had seeded the island with explosives, pressure plates in the mud, tripwires strung across doorways, even shells rigged to detonate if moved. Each sweep for survivors became a sweep for death. Soldiers crawling through abandoned trenches found the ground itself could kill. In the week after the landing, dozens of men were wounded or killed by mines and hidden charges, their names added to casualty lists with no enemy in sight. The greatest single loss came at sea. On August 18th, just after midnight, the destroyer USS Abner Red moved into Kiska harbor. A sudden blast tore through the stern, lifting men off their feet and sending a column of water and steel into the night. The ship had struck a drifting Japanese mine, likely left behind as the garrison slipped away. 71 sailors died in seconds. 47 more were pulled from the freezing water, battered and burned. The Abner Red, crippled but afloat, became a symbol of the unseen dangers that still haunted Kiska long after the enemy had vanished. By the end of Operation Cottage, the casualty ledger told a story no one had expected. In total, 313. Allied soldiers and sailors were dead or wounded, killed not by gunfire from the hills, but by their own side, by traps left in the earth, and by a mine drifting in the cold Bering Sea. The only living creatures found on Kiska, apart from the battered survivors, were a handful of stray dogs roaming the empty camps. The island, stripped of its defenders, claimed a terrible price all the same. Military intelligence failures still cost lives today, often in places where clarity is most needed. Operation Cottage reminds us, even in high-tech wars, fog and fear breed tragedy. Every decision carries consequences beyond the battlefield. History doesn't erase these mistakes. It warns us not to repeat them. Share your thoughts below.